Hello, 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 and welcome to this live stream. Thanks for sticking with us while we figured out a few little technical hitches. We're starting a little bit later than we expected, but that's okay. I think it'll be worth waiting, hanging in for. The whole idea behind this show, hopefully it's series, we'll see how it goes, but this show today, at least, is to sort of brainstorm and come up with a list of sort of wish list or ideas that we really want to see in the future of the ATEMs, maybe some things that we like, some things that we don't like so much. But we'll explore that along the way. If you have any questions or if you do have any sort of best case scenarios for your future ATEM, then do be sure to tag at here to record in the chat so I can see it nice and clear. But otherwise, I think I'll jump into the very kind folks who've agreed to join me today. So first up, with me on the panel here, we have Aaron. Welcome, Aaron. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll have some fun along the way. And next up as well, we have Adam as well. Welcome, Adam.
Hey there, how you doing?
And we'll just keep on going through here. Ali, you're up next. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Welcome, welcome. Good, good, thanks. And finally, last but not means least, Petra as well is here. Welcome, Petra.
Hello. Great to be here, guys.
And specifically thanks to Petra because you just finished the live stream about 60 minutes ago or so, and then you sort of hot-footed over to this stream as well. So thanks for making that happen for us.
No worries.
So like I said, throw any questions or thoughts along the way in the chat, and I'm sure we'll try to get to as much as possible. And I've just been reading through the chat since we had some time there before we kick things off, and I'd like to just welcome you all from all over the world. It's always nice to see so many different time zones, especially those ones who really ought to be asleep right now, but they're not. So let's just really kick things off and start with kind of where we're at right now with the ATEMs. I think we all in this panel here have at least one ATEM, probably within arm's reach away. Some of us. I may be looking at you, Aaron, specifically. I bet you have more than one ATEM right now, right?
I do, in fact. I have the main one I'm mixing this show on, and then I have this little ATEM Mini, which sometimes does little odd jobs here and there. Actually, there's two ATEMs running my video stream right now. ATEM Television Studio HD is there too. Yeah, no, they're all over the place. They're all over around here.
I knew it. And I can imagine, Adam, that you probably have a stack of them based on your Mix Effect app, right?
I did. I was fortunate during the testing of my app to have Blackmagic loan out some devices. So at one point I had the Constellation, I think the 4 Studio 4K stacked on top of each other. But right now, I just have the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO and the ATEM Mini Pro.
Okay, that's less than I thought maybe. I wanted to mention I have, just in this house alone, I have all 3 of the ATEM Minis, like the smaller ones, and the ATEM Mini Extremes here as well. And then I have the old classic Television Studio HD in an attic, not in this house, but in a different house. And over there is also the old ATEM 1ME HD as well. Which, yeah, funny story about that. We found out someone in the Discord, the I'm Here to Record Discord, actually sold that to me like however many years ago. Quite strange. And I had some issues with it, and I ended up having to email them about it. But it all worked out, and it's just funny that it cycled back around again. Ali, I can imagine that you have a few ATEMs on your hand as well.
There are a number in here right now. Yeah, there's an ATEM Mini Pro in the rack, which is getting this video to you. Constellation is not here, the one elsewhere in Edinburgh. And then we've got a couple of like TVS HDs and the 4Ks as well, the 4ME, rather.
And then Petra, how many ATEMs do you happen to have lying around?
About 4. I have the old ATEM Television Studio, the nice 19-inch rack with 6 inputs, where you also have like the third and the fourth could be either HDMI or SDI. And next to that, I have the ATEM Mini, the original ATEM Mini that I saw during the IBC in Amsterdam, which is kind of like the NAB if you live in the US. And I was blown away by the pricing and what it could do. Little did I know that later the ATEM Mini Pro came out, which I also own, and the ATEM Mini extreme ISO. So indeed, 4 ATEM minis and one television studio. Yeah.
Yeah, not surprising. A whole actually, I mean, we've all mentioned it. It's a pretty good place to just start because I certainly had a few of the older ATEMs, like I mentioned before, but I guess it was really the ATEM Mini for me that was like such a different device. I was carrying, I made a video about it at one point, but I was carrying, 4 times as much equipment around when I used to do gigs around Europe and stuff. And then the video actually has like 2 years in a row, 2 Januaries in a row, where the ATEM Mini, I got that in the meantime. And the amount of equipment that I had to bring the next year was just such a big difference. And I mean, I know Aaron, you specifically used to carry around the old Television Studio HD as well on a bike. Is that right?
Yeah. I made a 4U case in a 4U rack with the ATEM Television Studio HD, the original hyperdeck, a bunch of other stuff crammed in there. Did a really fun video about that, and that all loaded up onto my bike, and I would bike that around to gigs around town. I've actually never taken it on a plane, but I've biked around. And it's been a couple of years, and I am very excited to get a chance to do that again because I think it's going to take a lot less gear now because so much stuff is crammed into the ATEM Mini Extreme compared to all the things I had to do to turn the ATEM Television Studio HD into something that could be used for a production like that.
It felt like you sort of had to twist it to make it work. And I certainly, for the productions that I used to do, whenever I had the older ATEM 1ME, one of the older sort of grey-ish devices, really thin, and well, first of all, the cooling on that was pretty bad. I think it went down in history as being a terribly cooled device. But it was an exciting one for me because it was sort of my first major ATEM, but it was way more inputs and outputs than I actually needed. Really, what I found in the end was the ATEM Mini, even the original ATEM Mini, did most of what I wanted to do in general. But I mean, I'm imagining for that are a little bit more outside the scope of an ATEM Mini. Would that be right?
Yeah, you know what? The ATEM Mini Extreme is actually a surprising amount of kit in a box, and does a lot of things. Certainly for some of the traditional in-person stuff that we used to do and will be doing again. But yeah, like we've used the TVS HD a lot, and I always found we were really butting up against the requirements of that and everything it did. And we had one of the original TV studios, and that was a limiting device. And certainly, like at the time, it was super affordable and super great compared to everything else on the market. Like mostly you were buying like Panasonic switches, which are multiple thousands of pounds or whatever. But even then, it was a frustrating device to work with. And the cooling on that, I mean, I killed 2.
Frustrating is a pretty, but I think I don't think that's quite so much. People talk a lot about how hot the ATEM Minis get these days, but I've found certainly for the most part that even if they're getting hot and working hard, they still.
I mean, they've got fans
pretty
now,
well.
which is exciting.
And they got fans. Yeah, talk about an upgrade, right? But yeah, so I think we're just looking at the older sort of ATEM lineup that's still on sale right now. And I know, Aaron, in your videos, or some of your streams, you've definitely pointed out the how kind of old they look now and need of a refresh, right?
Yeah, that is. I've just been harping on that point for a while now. Of like they've been updating the design, the form factor of all of these other ATEMs, and these ones are just strangely left alone. So that is my strong suspicion that those are next up on the list.
Yeah, I sure hope so. But I guess it's been a sort of long time coming. Adam, are you sort of? I guess since Mix Effect is a fairly new, would you say you're fairly new to the ATEM lines, or have you been using these before and I just didn't know about it?
Oh, definitely. I started with the ATEM Mini Pro. I ordered it and it was on like backlog. And when I got it, it was just a few weeks later that they released the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So I felt a little bit of buyer's remorse. And then, I was just using it on a personal level. And then I decided to develop what eventually became Mix FX starting in like the end of 2020 and started in earnest in 2021. And that's just a few months later, they announced the ATEM Mini Extreme and the Extreme ISO. And it was great because I was able to adapt the program to support that and to support all the features that came with it, such as like SuperSource. But I'm definitely very new to this video production space.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're learning a lot and very fast, which is excellent. And I think the next sort of topic I wanted to talk about in general, since we kind of recapped all of the current ATEMs and or later in the show, but I wanted to kind of shift and talk about how we kind of work with ATEMs at the minute. So controlling the ATEM in general. I made a video a while back about like ways to control the ATEM, but since then a bunch of new ones have come out. And Adam, your app Mix Effect, in case anybody isn't familiar with it, just let us know what it is.
So Mix Effect is an app for iOS, iPadOS, and Apple Silicon Macs. That's basically a replacement for ATEM software control. So you can do almost everything in ATEM software control, but you can do it now on your iPad or your iPhone. But I've also extended the app to do things that are very difficult to do on the stock ATEM software control software, such as SuperSource. So I have things like SuperSource presets. I have like shortcuts integrations, a lot of kind of quality of life improvements to make controlling your.
Impressive. And in fact, you just did a live stream yesterday about some more updates to that, right?
Right. So I've been working with a developer in the Philippines, Johnny Estias, and he and I have come up with a native companion module for Mix Effect. So before you just had to type in all the generic OSE commands and know like the path to the command and all the parameters. But now it's very similar to any other native companion module where you have like drop-down menus. It's easy to find the commands. And so we're looking to expand the level of support that I offer through Companion to be able to control many more things.
That's really good. And Companion is a term that comes up again and again and again, and it's something a lot of us have been using for the longest time. Petra, I guess, I'm guessing, I'm sure you're using Companion somewhere in your chain. Is that right?
Yes, I am, but also Mix Effect. So actually, I would say that most of the time I'm using Mix Effect these days. Companion for controlling other devices, like for example, audio mixers and other components that are more aimed towards bigger streaming events. Next to my show, I actually have also a company that streams local and regional events. And then you really need to start to add a lot of additional components to make up for the size of it, right? So it's not, even though the ATEM Mini that we're talking about recently is really a powerhouse, you do have some limitations, and that is why you need other devices as well. But most of the time still Mix Effect. But I also use other hardware components as well. I don't know if I can talk about that at the moment, but I really like to use Scarroy devices. These are from what I like about them is that they're really in a very robust way, right? So they're not so much like for example with Companion, you need to have it working on a computer or on a Raspberry Pi in order to facilitate Companion or to facilitate the iPhone, the Mix Effect. What I like about the Scarroy devices is that they are standalone. Yes, they have built-in software, obviously, but they're standalone and they boot up like within maybe 10 seconds or so, and you don't have to scramble around to get everything. But I know they're not inexpensive. They're quite expensive in comparison with Companion and Mix Effect.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a little peek at those at the past. I do live pretty close to Denmark, down on the border, so I've actually went over to the Scarhoy office and chatted with them there and taken a look at some of their devices, and they're really good. I mean, I don't mean to keep saying I've made videos on it in the past, but it is true. But once you get them in your hands, like you said, they start up fast, and the whole control system that they've set up now, Unisketch, I think it's called, or maybe it's changed names, but it's a really good like sort of ecosystem that they've created, and they've sort of gone beyond the just Blackmagic ATEM stuff, but being able to control all of that with one box, just like Companion, I guess, has been really good. I didn't want to. I've been looking at the comments along the way here. Thanks, Joel, for becoming a member of the channel, by the way. And we are having a couple of audio issues here and there, but I know that behind the scenes it's being worked on. So hopefully we can get that solved as we go along here. But I see one more thing, universal control. Ali, is that something that you've just
Universe.
popped in there? Oh, Universe, sorry.
Love our Stream Decks. We've got a number of them. And like we've used Companion for controlling ATEMs and other stuff for ages, because it's a really nice way to get... we'll talk about memories on the ATEMs later. But it's a really nice way to fill in a bunch of features that like they don't have for controlling, for recalling shots and that. But recently I was introduced to this other piece of software which also works with Stream Decks or other things, which is called Universe Control. Which is like if someone took Companion and made it really, really expensive and worked with touchscreens. And it is inordinately expensive. But it does the Companion thing of being able to talk to a bunch of devices, but it gives you arbitrary control surfaces on touchscreens or Stream Decks or a couple of other things that I've never looked at or in much detail. But it's really valuable for stuff like this rack that I'm broadcasting through today has a Pearl Nano in it as the SRT encoder. And one nice thing about Universe is it will talk to the Pearl, but it will also pull back data. So for controlling that encoder, instead of pressing a button on the Pearl, we press a button in Universe on a little touchscreen, which says, hey, go do this, and it fires a bunch of actions, but also gives us return feedback. And it does this. It supports, I think, the ATEM. It supports a bunch of other ancillary stuff that you'd want to use with an ATEM. And although it is inordinately, hilariously expensive, and I do not want to think about the fact that I'm going to need the highest tier license at some point, it is astoundingly useful for controlling, for doing really significant, big productions with really small numbers of people.
Do you have I haven't heard of this before. Do you have a rough price that's like really expensive? Okay, I thought maybe you just happened to have that on top of your head because it was so painful. But no worries if you.
Is it one of those things where if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it?
The price is on the website, which is so it's not that. Okay, so standard, which is what we currently have, is 750 euros. What we're going to upgrade to Universe Pro, which has more functionality in like creating touchscreens and web interfaces, and that is about €2,000. Which you could buy a whole other Vision Mixer for, and that is very scary.
Get a lot of Stream Decks for that price. Does anybody here actually still use the ATEM software control for more than a few seconds during a production?
What do you mean more than a few seconds?
Like during the day, sometimes I'll just jump in there. I don't have a button on my Stream Deck for the media player. So, if I really need to show something on the media player, I'll hop in, punch it, leave again. That's a few seconds. But I used to, obviously, whenever I started, I was, number keys all the way, space bar and enter.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. I guess it doesn't make any sense anymore. Nobody?
I just use it for the media player. Like if I'm building out my show and I'm using Photoshop, there's a problem with the M1 Mac. You can't use that export plugin. So I just save it and then I just drag it into the media player.
Mine works on my M1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it? Yeah. That plugin doesn't seem to work for me anymore. So I don't know. There's reports on the Blackmagic forum where they're complaining that it doesn't work, and I'm one of those people. So I don't know what you did with your.
I have had the Photoshop plugin crash a forum me before as well, which is fun. But likewise, these days I'd never touch the software except to load in shots into the media player, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's media player.
I think Media Pool is definitely my most frequent use of it. I will say I do often dive into there for fiddling with the keyers also if I'm trying to create something on the fly or new that I hadn't prepared. it is a fast way to get into the keying settings as well. And ultimately, if I'm going to be doing something where I'm going to be repeating that action a lot, then I will absolutely put it into a companion button, or turn it into a macro, either way. But for on the fly stuff, I always have it open during my shows because there's always something I want to do that I hadn't planned for. So it is like sort of my default thing I fall back on.
Okay, so it's still there somewhere in the chain, and if you had to use it, you probably still would. And Graham here in the chat says, I only use it when I set a streaming key. So that's
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's
a
another
good
one.
reason. That's yeah, I guess that's actually one of my use cases for it. But yeah, that's controlling. I guess whenever I started making some content about this kind of stuff, it was always if you want to use this MIDI controller over here, here are 5 steps that you need to do before you get to that point. And then it totally works once you have it all set up, but you need to follow this 15-minute video very carefully. And then you get to use that MIDI controller. Now, I think while it's gotten easier now with things like ATEM's app, it seems like the using hardware controllers is not quite the same. People really like to use iPads and touchscreen stuff. Now, I have said in the past on the streams and in videos that I'm really a big fan of actual buttons, but I'm imagining, Adam, that you've gotten, I know that plenty of people are very happy with the app, and do you feel that sort of, and now that you've added the companion module, do you feel that sort of push towards a mixture between real buttons and a touch screen?
I prefer the touchscreen personally, but I can see with the Stream Deck there's a value in having buttons that can do like multiple things at once. So I definitely want to support kind of both those use cases. And a lot of people, when I initially launched Mixfect, it didn't come with companion support, but people asked for that, and I looked into it and said, "Oh, okay, I think I can do this." And then it kind of like took off, and then people wanted a native module, but I don't have any experience writing a companion module. But fortunately, Johnny, the developer, has a lot of experience, and he kind of stepped up to the plate to provide that solution. Now I'm thinking of like, when I actually make a show, I do it on the buttons because I can just push a button, and it also helps me think. Okay, I'm in this, this section first, and then this section. This section is kind of like a run of show device for me. And Mix Effect is really more of a control device. It's not really a run of show device.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to like how comfortable over time you get. And whenever I watch you on one of your videos on your live streams, Adam, it just seems like you've got, what to do. Obviously you built the app, but you know what to do. So you seem so comfortable. And I think whenever I'm reaching down to try to press buttons, I feel so clumsy. But you just look so, cool, calm, collected, and tapping on the screen. So I think that helps a lot. But you know what? We could talk about controlling.
I can do those screens. I just can't get my audio delay to work correctly. But I think it's working today.
One small issue, you can always fix that next time. But no, I think we could talk about control even more. But I wanted to switch again now to talk a little bit more about like sort of a tricky thing these days, which is getting presenters and people into your ATEM production. So it's something a lot of us have used it for. Pre-pandemic days, the ATEM was there, the cameras were there, everything just made sense, and it was all working nicely. And then everyone wants to use Zoom or some different flavor of that. So over the last few years, we've really tried desperately to make the ATEM work in those situations. And I think now we're kind of getting towards that general direction. But screen scraping Zoom was pretty rough not that long ago. And Aaron, you're nodding your head. Is that something you've had some familiar experience with?
Yeah, I've had to do a fair amount of that over the last year and a half now. And yeah, screen grabbing a Zoom call was how I started out. And I started looking for other solutions and eventually found Video.Ninja, which is the one I'm currently most happy with. It seems to be the most stable. Unfortunately, I'm not super happy with its performance on a Raspberry Pi, but it does work great on a computer with a real graphics card. And I think there's some good, promising work being done with Zoom ISO as well. Still struggling personally to get that sorted out, but we will work through that. I probably just need the right hardware combinations of things to make that work. But yeah, it's definitely been a fun challenge to try to figure that out. I remember one of the first attempts. I was actually having you on my channel, John, back.
Thought we weren't going to talk about that.
Yeah, maybe we should not talk about that.
No, go ahead.
It was
Feelings are fine.
fun experiment. That was over NDI. That was when I was trying out the Bird Dog NDI decoder, and things I learned from that stream were do more testing ahead of time. Basically,
Or
that's
any
what it came down
testing.
to, or any testing. Yeah. But we've made good progress since then.
We definitely have, and I think there's at the time it felt like there was only one or two ways to actually do it, and that was the one of. I remember whenever I had Doug on one of my live streams, like a couple of summers. Oh, I guess it was last summer, and I just couldn't get Skype to work the way I wanted, so Zoom was the only other option, and it was really low quality, 360p. But watching Adam, your live stream yesterday, you were using Zoom ISO for that, right? And it looked really great.
I was, and I'm a current believer in the kind of the Zoom ISO approach. You know, I've tried the Video Ninja. It's a little confusing, I guess, for there's a lot of settings you can do. It's very powerful. I think it probably produces the best quality of all the kind of services, but there's a lot of fiddling to get to work. With Zoom ISO, everyone is comfortable. The remote talent is comfortable with Zoom. They know how to do it. You just give them the Zoom link and they're done, assuming their mic and their camera are set up properly. And on my end, I just have like this deck link card that just sends the inputs into the ATEM, and I can say this is Zoom ISO 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's actually how I'm looking at you right now, because I put you in my multi-view so I can actually see instead of having to look at my screen here. And I think it takes some configuration, but once you get it down and you're like right down the steps, I think it's the solution for me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting whenever you bring in people to talk about this kind of stuff, that they will come in with interesting solutions, and you're just, instead of just sitting in the Zoom call as you might expect a general customer or client or whatever to do, you've really stepped it up in testing out ISO. But Ali, I bet that you have some interesting ways to bring people into your productions, right?
We do a lot of SRT. So for context, for people who may not sit in the Discord and don't know me and don't know what I do mostly corporate events television. So previously, the conference staff traveling around, going to corporate events and conferences and producing that, but also like corporate comms and product launches and stuff like that. And one of the things which we noticed early on last year was medical stuff had to keep happening. There are a lot of like medical trials and all of that which had to carry on, and they still needed their events. We just couldn't travel for them. So after we initially started, like everyone else, with Zoom, but also with Teams, because in medical land, your video conference tool of choice is Teams, and you will like that, and you'll put up with that. So we had an extremely fun time anticipating all the things Microsoft were going to break about Teams. And again, everyone on the Discord will have seen the photograph of me and 16 laptops, each with connected to a Teams call. Then Microsoft introduced Teams NDI, and it had a horrible watermark, so everyone got really excited about it. Then we couldn't use it. And then they removed the watermark and made it really unreliable, so we still couldn't use it. So we have eventually settled on doing SRT for remote contrib. So I'm talking to you right now through one of our RCU racks. We have a couple of these built up, and they are basically a little blue rack with an ATEM Mini Pro, an FFan Pearl Nano. They used to have other encoders, but then I bought the Pearls, and I really like them. And a bunch of other ancillary stuff for control. And they get shipped out all over the place with a camera. This one's a XF405 from Canon, and a little bit of lighting. And then that is how people present into the calls. And generally, they have their own laptop with a Zoom call or a Teams call for return. But what we've also been doing, which is really cool, is using iPads to do remote contribution. Actually, iPads and AirPods, weirdly. AirPods get a lot of criticism for the audio quality. And it seems actually if you just pull the audio feed straight off a pair of AirPods and you don't try and do anything fancy to it, it sounds fine. So we use 2 apps for that. Rivet, which is really nice. I like Rivet, which you basically people type in a code on their device, and that configures Rivet with an SRT outgoing feed and SRT incoming feed. And that just comes to our decoders in the studio. But also Haivision's Play Pro, which is their SRT player. But if you craft the right URL, it becomes an SRT transmitter instead. And so what we figured out with that was that we could have one of our medical industry clients push this app to all of their iPads, and then drop a link into people's calendars that they just clicked on, and that gave us their feed. And it was a lot of work to get people sort of on board with, oh, this isn't just a Zoom call, this isn't just a Teams call. But given the number of times that people, like early on with Zoom, people typed into chat and said some nonsense in chat, or wouldn't unmute themselves, having just a bunch of decoders in the studio where each person pops out on one SDI is super valuable, because it does give you it gives you a proper 1080, and we take 1080-25 because we're in the UK, but it gives you a proper full resolution feed from a nice camera, and no faff, no like noise cancellation or mute buttons or things that the talent could press and then break. And so that is mostly what we do for remote contrib.
So I have a question about that. You're talking about a camera on the iPad, right? No separate camera. You're actually using the iPad's camera?
So this client has all iPad Pros for a lot of their medical industry. There's so much money there. But so they have iPad Pros, and the new iPad Pros have fantastic cameras on them. But having said that, when you're just bringing in like a bunch of doctors and it's effectively a Q&A, you can get away with like the 720p front camera on an iPad Air if you're putting it in a box and putting some faff and lower thirds around it, because people do understand, hey, this is online, this is virtual, it's not going to look gorgeous. And actually, one of the things I do find really disconcerting is really high-resolution webcams, because they look really strange. I've got a Logitech Brio at my desk over there, and it's 4K, it's beautiful. The sensor is like the size of a needle, so everything in the room is in focus, and it's really weird and disconcerting in a way that I can't really pin down. But I certainly think that with tiny cameras, there is a point at which they are too good. And actually having a mediocre camera does work fine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you did share a photo not that long ago, so people can check it out in the Discord for sure. Now, Petra, I'm guessing, I know that you use vMix a lot, so do you sort of sidestep the remote contribution into the ATEM and use vMix, or do you use it sometimes, the ATEM, for remote stuff?
Yeah, so you're right. I definitely use vMix Call a lot, which is a built-in feature in vMix. The reason is actually that I work a lot with volunteers that are not technical. And what I like about having something that is built into vMix that can easily be enabled and used without the need of thinking about return feeds and mix minuses. That makes it really easy for us. That being said, if it's a bigger audience, or it's not based on volunteers but really a professional, then I also go to the SRT together with Zoom or Teams as a return feed, like we do right now as well. At least I am using SRT via vMix, pushing it into this stream, and the return feed is a Zoom call which I have right in front of me. So yeah, basically a lot vMix.
Yeah. And if you want to learn or watch some more interesting experiments with contributing to the ATEM, me and Ryan, who's not on the panel today, who's asleep somewhere because he's in Australia right now, but we did a series, and we're just going to finish that on Monday coming up, but we've been doing a series on remote contribution called Return Feed. It's going well. We're learning a lot along the way, but it's been an interesting experiment, and we've got many more episodes to come, I'm sure, in sort of a season 2. But time is disappearing fast on our stream today, and I wanted to sort of shift again the gears to what we might think is coming soon-ish from Blackmagic. NAB is coming pretty soon. Whether or not they'll be there, we don't really know at this point, but that doesn't really matter. I'm imagining they'll announce something around that time, so we'll see. But speaking of that, Aaron, I'm going to come to you first because you've made a few predictions, sorry, over the years about what you would like in an ATEM Mini. Tell us a bit about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I will say I've made a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily call them predictions, but more wish lists, and I have
Fair,
continued
fair.
to be surprised about what Blackmagic has actually done. So I'm not claiming to be an expert in predicting what they're making, but I do actually predict that they are going to replace that middle tier, because that is just, it's almost obvious at this point. The question is what goes into it. And I think that we are likely to see a lot of the features of the Extreme brought into that, although I suspect probably not the H.264 or the RTMP encoder, because they have it external in the web presenter and they don't want to cut into those sales. But I think regardless of that tier, I think what I'm actually even more excited about is new form factors like this ATEM Nano, which is something that is just exists only in my head. And I think that there are a lot of really interesting use cases for it. And I was actually just talking about this the other day, but the idea would be that it would be like a 2-input switcher. And why I think I'm interested in it is because it actually serves two completely different audiences. I think it would be an even smaller stepping stone for people who are brand new to ATEMs in general, where an ATEM Mini, even the Mini, which is small, 4 inputs, that's honestly 2 more inputs than most people are going to know what to do with, right? A lot of people are going to be having one camera front, maybe a top down for like something on a table in front of them, or their camera and their slides, that kind of thing. And if you're brand new to the idea of using an external camera beyond your webcam at all, 2 inputs is honestly going to get you pretty far. And on the flip side, a very affordable 2-input real switcher like the ATEM Mini would be super, super useful for pros at doing live events who just need a thing that's like far away on a stage somewhere or in some back corner of the venue that can switch between 2 feeds and not have to run tons of cables. So I think it has applications in both markets, which is really, really tempting for me to have that thing exist.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's funny that we all the Mini and then the Mini Pro, and then you hoping for like what's next, what's bigger, what's better. And I love that eventually you were just like, well, you know what, maybe a little tiny one would be really nice to have. And
Yeah.
I do agree, there's plenty of use cases for that. Sometimes I've said earlier in this show that I brought the ATEM Television Studio HD, then the next year the ATEM Mini, but I probably could have got away with the ATEM Nano on a couple of gigs that I've done that are just so simple, and that would have just done the job. So we'll see. I would love to see all the ideas. Specifically, I'd love to see the previous one that you sort of mentioned, the Mini with SDIs and all that kind of stuff. Would be really cool.
Yeah, that was
But
pre-Extreme. So I was, again,
right,
I was not correct in predicting the Extreme. I didn't think they were going to do something that big, but I was hoping for a more incremental bump. But it's interesting to see their plan with that. Yeah, this one with the 4 HDMIs, 2 SDIs, for just a little bit of that sort of bringing in sources from their HyperDecks or other professional gear like that. I never expected it to get so big with the Extreme. It's just so many buttons on that thing.
so many buttons and so many camera control buttons. I haven't pressed any of those yet. I've had no reason. But so I'm definitely, being in this tiny house, I used to sort of envisage bigger ATEMs, but now I'm sort of slipping back into the ATEM Mini, happy with the smaller things. But I'm thinking, Ali, you maybe would use something more like stealing some ideas from other people like Roland and things like that. Would that be fair to say?
What I really want is someone just take a constellation and just chop it in half. I love the TVS HD. It's a great form factor. Right. I like smallish, but still powerful kit. And for the longest time, we've been moving towards like now we're doing hybrid, and we're moving back into doing live streaming, but also doing non-live streaming things. And And one thing that I've always really wanted is the ability to run in-room displays and all of that, other auxiliary stuff. And Roland, maybe like a couple months ago, just stealth announced their new switcher, the V160, which is kind of like ATEM Mini Extreme form factor, sort of yay big. 8 SDI inputs, 8 HDMI inputs, I think most of which have standards, converters, and scalers on them. 7 outputs of various kinds, I think 3 HDMI, 3 SDI, and a webcam output. And it's really cool because it's this tiny little box which has 16-ish inputs. You can only actually have, I think, 12 on the buttons. You have to route them first, but still, tons of inputs. So you can reasonably run like a bunch of cameras, some play out, some graphics, and enough outputs that are individually switchable that you can run a video wall, some iMag, for bigger rooms. You could run a stream and some recording. And so what I really want to see, my biggest frustration with that device is its desktop. We, at this scale, everything that we do needs to fit in a rack, and the ATEM Mini Pro in this rack is Velcroed into a rack shelf, and there's no way you can ever touch any of the buttons. I think someone may have seen my ATEM Extreme TVS HD, where I took an ATEM Mini Extreme, put it in a rack, and put a blanking plate on the front so you couldn't touch any of the buttons, and just controlled it with a panel, and it was great. And so what I want to see what I would really like to see in a new ATEM is something that fills that TVS HD or the 1U ATEM niche as a full 1U thing, with some controls on the front, but mostly with maybe 12, 16 inputs and a ton of those new aux-style outputs like they've done on the ATEM Extreme.
Yeah, that's
because
that's
the Constellation does that, and it's really nice to have the flexibility of just like any output is this. That's a screen now. That's whatever. And it means that when you are building these tiny, these little racks, I don't have a van. I have like a medium-sized SUV. And the more stuff you can cram in the smaller amount of space, the more flexibility you can cram in a smaller amount of space, the more stuff you can take with you and the more events you can do with the same gear. And that's what I really want to see in sort of the next thing that they make.
The next month or so will be nice to see, because I guess we've seen all the HyperDecks obviously just re-released. We've seen the new studio cameras re-released. We've seen the web presenter and 4K version of that re-released. So it feels like the next evolution of the bigger ATEMs wouldn't have any of that stuff built in. Well, obviously they wouldn't have the camera part built in, but they wouldn't have the streaming built in, I'm guessing, nor the recording built in, I'm guessing. But unless anybody here thinks there's sort of a even more mid-range one that might have some of those features. No?
I think they're done with the desktop line for
I'd
a
like
while.
it.
I don't think there's room for more variations on the desktop form factor, which frankly I'm happy about, because these stands take a while to design and I want a break. I want them to go do rack mount stuff for a while so I don't have to worry about stands for them.
On the desktop point, actually, it's just come to me. Has anyone used, actually, or come across in person one of the TVS Pros or the TV, like TV Studio 4K or HD Pro desktop thing? Because I don't think I've ever actually touched one of those. And that seems like...
I used one. Yeah, I used one during development. It's a very nice thing, but the buttons feel fantastic. But it's big. And if you needed to access certain things from that little menu and that trackball or that spinning wheel, it's very inconvenient. So like something that I would like is something smaller than the Extreme, quiet like the Mini, but with more ports. So I don't need the buttons, because for me, my interface to accessing, the interface is an iPhone or an iPad with my app. So make it like a Television Studio Pro. It has some buttons on the front for if you actually need to push something, but just load it up with ports. And then most importantly is to make it quiet, because the fans on those rack mounts and even the ATEM Television Super or the HyperDeck Studio Mini, like the old version, they were loud. And I hear like the new ones, maybe Aaron, I think you might have some of the new ones.
The new
They're
HyperDecks
quieter.
are reasonably quiet now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Constellation, isn't it?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Constellation is not.
The 4ME broadcast is the
Yeah,
worst though.
it gets really loud. So I've only ever seen that desktop one that you mentioned, Ali, at events and conferences where they would hire it in to power some screens around the room, and it seemed like a good case. You could build it in a case, and it had the buttons and it had the connections. But I mean, I haven't really seen
90 million white buttons on the front instead of anything
precisely.
useful.
So we've been talking.
Jumping about a bit, actually. Just
Yeah.
on the subject of ATEMs, I'd really like. So, again, I've mentioned this in the Discord. We're building some new racks at the moment for doing more traveling work. And one thing that I really want to have in those is a rack drawer with a panel in it. And I always thought, ATEM advanced panel, whatever, it's an amount of money, it fits in there, until I measured it. And if you put that thing in a rack drawer, it takes up 5U. Including the little PDZ control stalk on it. So if you're building an 8U control rack, well, you've got 3U for your program preview, and then 1U for a pull-out monitor for your multi-view, and suddenly the panel doesn't fit. It just occurred to me that little form factor of ATEM TVS Pro would make for a fantastic control surface if it had nothing on the back and no white buttons. I would really like that because it's dinky vertically. It's just not, but it's got buttons on it.
Yeah, maybe I can extend on that one, because one of the things that I'm actually really looking forward to see is not the advanced panel, but just like they did for DaVinci Resolve, they have like the advanced panel for that, but they also have a micro panel. Basically, they just stripped off the displays and only the control surface. That would be enough for my use cases, and being that it looks quite a lot like the application, the software that they use, it might be enough to just not use the software at all. And above that, having only one cable that you have to extend compared to having like 6 or 8 cables at the back, I think that having a panel is also very nice to use from that perspective as well.
That's true. I guess I will. I'll just have to edit up this part of the live stream afterwards and send it along to some contacts and see. We'll do some sort of tally after the next announcement and see how we all got on. But that's sort of hardware. Now, I know that there's another side to that, which is the software and nice things we'd like to see in there. Petra, anything in the software side of things that you'd really like them to add or improve?
Oh, I mean, if you look at what they have at the moment, it's all RTMP, but I also would like to have more protocols being enabled. SRT, we're talking about it today as well. That would be great if that would be part of the standard setup. Maybe NDI, even though that might meet, I don't know if that is also something that they would do, but definitely SRT. NDI would be definitely a second if it comes to the protocols. I also would like to have, even though it's just very limited, the possibility to, within the software, be able to add a title and a name of a person based on, and so that you don't have to create every time a new illustration, or you have to add a computer or any other like HyperDeck to show a lower third. That would be also very much appreciated if that would be available. That would be something that I would like to have. Yeah.
As someone who creates a graphics application, I'm okay with them not working too hard on that. But not much I can do if they do. But software-wise, Adam, I'm assuming there's some more underlying things that you would like to see in the protocols and stuff like that. Would that be right?
Part of it's selfish that, if they don't improve it, that would just make my app more popular. But official kind of the official SDK currently supports Mac and Windows. So a lot of developers who've written kind of control applications have kind of had to use unofficial means to control the ATEM. And maybe if they release kind of an iOS SDK or a JavaScript SDK, that would allow for kind of more adoption and more kind of promotion from Blackmagic for kind of these other solutions, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and going back to what I said earlier, the 5-step process, or maybe it was 4-step process, just to get your MIDI controller to work with that. These days, it seems even easier to do that stuff, and there's a huge market out there with all the ATEM Minis in people's hands. So it would be only better to see them improve that. But like you said, and like I said with my graphics software, some things I'm kind of okay with them not spending too much time on, but I know that some underlying changes would really help us all out. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'd love to see that kind of stuff in there. Any other cool improvements anyone would like to see that I didn't get to there?
Yeah, this is on the edge
sound.
of.
Oh, wow,
Yeah, I was going to say
everybody,
the
Go ahead.
audio. I do love the audio processing capabilities of like the dynamics and that kind of stuff is fantastic that it's in there, and it's helped me out a lot because I don't have an external mixer for this, and it means I can do more stuff with the audio. But really, really missing some mix minus possibilities because that's just like a no-brainer when you're trying to bring in other feeds. Like I can't send my audio from the ATEM into this Zoom call that we're all on because it would just be a giant feedback mess, and I need to be able to do mix minus in order to do that properly. And that it feels like it's just right there. It's just such a low hanging fruit for them to do that, and I just wish they would push that out. But I don't know the internals of whether that's like a hardware or a firmware or not possible on the existing model. But that's what I want to see is just better audio management. They're so
You're
close.
absolutely right. And a couple of people mentioned that in the chat already. Mix minus is like a buzzword in the chat. And it's unfortunate because when the ATEM Mini Extreme came out and the headphone jack was there, everyone was like, oh, I've got a great solution for this. And then they just only let you enable one channel at a time. So I felt like we were so close.
We were so
to
close.
having some sort of a hack together solution, but we didn't quite get there. And one of the other things I would be interested to see is it's with the new cameras out now, the new Blackmagic Studio camera 4K Plus and Pro, which is a real easy to say. They have the Pro version anyway has like the talkback in there with the SDI switchers. So I am quite interested to see where they head in that direction with new ATEMs. Interestingly, whenever they brought out these cameras, they showed the old ATEM Television Studio HD, which seemed surprising at the time, but perhaps they weren't quite ready to show some new ATEM. I have no idea. But I would like to see that kind of stuff worked in there somehow. And one other thing is, does anybody here want an ATEM Mini 4K for any use case? No.
I don't think my internet connection can handle 4K. It
Mine
can barely handle
the stream today.
1080p
It's just
out.
about struggling along. So
I think
yeah,
a
we'll see.
I think I'm
stream.
okay with the. Sorry, go ahead.
4K stream from here would be like 40 megasecond, which is doable, but it's, that at that point, I mean, you're hearing me over our 4G stuff because I thought it'd be fun. And like one of those data terminals on a good day is about 38 meg down, and we bond a couple of them. But having a single stream that is more than one data terminal worth of upload is slightly terrifying. And so I don't think I want to do any 4K, at least over this. But I know there are people who like 4K and want to do more 4K, and I'm sure they have valid reasons for it as well.
I'm sure they do, yeah. Actually, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all for going through this with me, talking about all these fun things. Time went past really fast, and we've ended up crunching a lot of info in there. Aaron, let's start with you. Where can people find you, and what kind of stuff can they find whenever they go there?
Yeah, I'm on my website's aaronpk.tv. YouTube channel is my name. It's linked from that website. I do videos about ATEMs, about live streaming. I host a weekly live show, sort of Q&A style. Come ask questions about whatever you want to chat about. And yeah, really focus on helping people learn about getting started with live streaming and live video production.
And Adam, where can people find you? Where should they go after this?
So if you're interested in Mix Effect, you can go to mixeffect.app. I've been posting a lot of YouTube videos on my channel, which is just my name, Adam Tao. Also have like a personal website at tao.com, but I haven't been posting too much to that. I just too many things to do. I don't have enough time to update everything.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Too many things to do. And Ali, how about you? Where should people head to find you?
That's a good question. I don't really do social media or YouTube or anything, and I feel very uncomfortable on this side of the camera. Company I run, FTX Productions, FTX Production Services, we have a website. If you look at it after next Saturday, because we've got a website fettling happening this week, but you can find me in the Discord and in Edinburgh doing weird events, television stuff.
I'm glad you came on this side of the camera because you've been. It's been excellent to have you here. And Petra, what about you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, on the website on the channel Tech Condo. This is where I perform how-to videos. I have a weekly live show on the Saturday, right before this time, and basically Q&A sessions, but also complete walkthroughs, complete demo of whatever is whatever the topic is at that time. Product reviews, obviously also. So Tech Condo, that's where you can find me.
Excellent, excellent, and thank you all once again for joining me today and chatting about all this fun stuff. It's been really good. We've brainstormed some things, I hope, and if anything, just sort of chatted about things we'd like to see. Who knows what will happen? I just wanted to thank some people. Obviously, you on the panel here, thank you. Thanks for the viewers watching along and the members of the channel as well. Something I didn't mention along the way because this has been very much an experiment, and you'll notice all of us here in the panel weren't really pressing any buttons. So we did have a small team behind the scenes doing all of the work, mixing the show, making it all work, and it's been excellent to have them there. I'm sure in a future episode we can chat about what they did and how it all went. But yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for this first episode. I guess we'll see you in the next episode or on Monday for the next episode of Return Feed. All right, bye-bye.